stress, to me, is a hypnotic process. Certainly anxiety is. I work with a lot of anxiety, and one thing that seems to be across the board is that when people are doing their anxiety pattern, they are slipping into a really powerful hypnotic state. And when I say that, I mean hypnosis as a state of heightened suggestibility. Hypnosis is a state where you have access to more of the unconscious, involuntary processes where the fight or flight response comes from. So if you think about hypnosis as being a state where you have pushed aside, the way that I like to explain it is this. If you imagine there's a barrier here, right? And here we have the unconscious mind, and that's about 95% of who you are, of your functioning, of your everyday non-awareness. And then there's this little percentage that is the conscious mind. So the conscious mind is really limited in what it can take in, what it can hold in consciousness. So if you imagine, right, this barrier, and this is where all habituated patterns are. So anything done with repetition, felt with repetition, said with repetition, will become an unconscious pattern. So when you're talking about making a suggestion that counters the program running, be it a pain program or a stress program, anxiety program, any habituated pattern, it becomes hard to change consciously. That's why people have a hard time changing. But in hypnosis, we push this aside, and our suggestions can go right in. So, when people say, is there really a mind-body connection? I mean, there you have it. You watch a movie, your brain feels threatened, and you start to go into fight or flight. The brain says, uh-oh, there's a threat, so it immediately protects you. And the way it does that, it doses you in adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol and all those stress hormones, and it speeds up your heart rate, and it lifts your blood pressure to send extra blood and oxygen to the arms and to the legs so you can fight or flight. But we're just watching a movie. Well, the thing that most people don't realize is that, the brain reacts the same way to our internal movies. So that someone who has a fear of flying, they can be sitting in their living room thinking about the flight next week, and they will literally start to get into one of those states, right? Because the fear, the narrowing of attention, which is what we do when we get stressed out and we start to narrow and fixate on that thing that we're worrying about, that thing that's causing us anxiety. So we have a narrowing of attention, and a little fear tends to excite the brain, right? The amygdala, all that, and it will flip this aside, so that what happens is when we're starting to get scared and fixate, we literally slip into a suggestible state, so that the next things that we say to ourselves kind of act like hypnotic commands. And we're going in and out of these states all the time. So to what degree is the question? And in what direction are you moving in? So when you get fixated on something negative, right, you go into one of those depressive trances, which are really heavy and slow moving. And then you kind of, go deeper and deeper. I mean, that in itself is trance-inducing, right? It's just a negative trance. So there's many ways to look at that and to think about hypnosis. But to me, I think it's a state that we go in and out of all the time, and so you might want to be aware of it and aware of your own heightened suggestibility to yourself. There's some great quotes, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. You know that one? It's so true. When I work with people and I hear their story, if you listen to someone's story, the story they tell themselves primarily, their therapists, their family, it's the repetitive story of what I can't do or my pain or this and that. If you listen to their story, you'll know the self-hypnosis they're already utilizing.